Good evening, I'm Martina Hughes, and I will be sharing with you this evening about the power of trust in relationships. Thanks so much to Freya for inviting me to speak here in the Fierce Mystics group, and I hope that you all get something valuable out of my offering to you this evening. You'll see behind me, this is my feline companion, Hades. For those who've seen me on Facebook Live before, Hades normally joins me for Facebook Live. It's part of his role in my life. So the power of trust in relationships is a really big and significant topic. It's certainly something that I could speak about for hours and days, and it's one of the topics that we cover in the workshops and retreats that myself and my partner Rod offer. But to give you some practical exploration, some practical knowledge of how you can apply these understanding of trust to your relationship, I'm going to share with you tonight a little bit about my personal journey with trust, and then also some practical steps for how you can start cultivating more trust in your life and in your relationships. Hi Freya, lovely to see you and feel you online. So let's have a look. First of all, trust literally means the ability or the capacity to believe in something or someone without having exact knowledge or without having certainty of what things may look like. So trust actually is an invitation for us to be vulnerable. I find that vulnerability, as much as it's spoken about today, as much as it is a common word today, it's still not very well known. But in order to trust somebody, there's a sense of stepping in and believing without knowing. And when we believe without knowing, that by its very nature means that it requires vulnerability, because vulnerability is to be in a state of openness without having a guarantee of what the outcome or what the end point looks like. There's just a stepping into opening. I know a lot of times when people think about trust, they think about fidelity, and of course fidelity and being faithful in a relationship is one of the reflections of trust and how that can show up. However, I think that it's easy for people to then overlook the deeper aspects of how trust looks in a day-to-day relationship. I'll often hear people say, oh yes, of course I trust my partner. My partner wouldn't cheat on me, or my partner, wouldn't look at another woman or wouldn't look at another man. But still there's some deeper element that's missing in the relationship. There'll be a deeper quality of openness, of surrender, of connection that's not present. And that really comes back to trust. So, hi Christina. I'm glad you love this topic, and do feel free to comment or ask any questions. So for me, the way the lack of trust showed up is that there was a hypervigilant voice inside of me. And this hypervigilant voice inside of me was always looking for reasons to not trust the other person, looking for reasons to withhold, looking for reasons to keep myself somehow separate. So the way that would look is that I'd be walking through life going, that person was a little bit late. Oh, that person wasn't very, responsive to what I just said. Oh, that person said something that didn't sit very well with me. And then in a relationship, kind of holding myself back a bit and going, I'll open up a little more when he satisfies all these imaginary criteria that I've created. Or I'll open up more when I know that he's trustable. But all that did was cause me to be more separate, more detached. And whenever I was sitting back waiting, being in that hypervigilant space of I'll open up when, I found more and more reasons to not open up. Freya says she relates, this is a really big topic for us women, and actually for men as well, but particularly from the perspective as a woman, what I see is that, for myself anyway, and a lot of women I've worked with, is that when we were very young, the people we were dependent on, our parents, at some point let us down. Now, in some cases, our parents letting us down might have been a minor thing, it might have been a major thing, but our parents are human like everyone. And so as a child, feeling let down by our parents in whatever form that took, there's this heightened sense of anxiety, there's this heightened sense of hypervigilance and a sense of, I can't trust anyone. I just have to take care of myself. And then begins our first layers of defense and keeping ourselves separate. One of the other things that was extremely painful for me in this regard is that the thing I wanted most deeply of all in the world, I wanted to be able to open and to surrender and to experience the fullness of life and orgasm and ecstasy and radiance and flow and all the beautiful feminine things. I wanted to be able to feel that radiate and move through my body. And at the same time, the thing I was most scared of was feeling all of that. So there comes the double bind, the sense of the thing I want most is to open and surrender, and the thing I am most afraid of is to open and surrender. So then the double bind creates this internal contraction and this sense of, I'll do it when. I'll do it when. I'll do it when life is perfect. I'll do it when the man who shows up in my life is perfect. But of course, life is not perfect. And circumstances, while ever we hold off waiting for that moment when, we're essentially holding ourselves hostage. I was holding myself hostage. I was keeping myself separate from others through all the imaginary rules that I'd made up. And so then missing out on some of the richness of connection that I desired. And this it came to a head in my relationship with Rod through a variety of conversations and disagreements that he and I had. And at one point, I was feeling into the ways in which Rod wasn't trusting me. And then, of course, the flip side of that, meaning that I had to look at the ways that I wasn't trusting him. And in doing so, I could feel how there was a part of me that kept my emotional experiences to myself. There was a part where my deepest expression, my my strongest feelings, my deepest longings and desires, I was still keeping separate from him. There was still this thing operating that I didn't fully trust him. And in seeing that I didn't fully trust him, I also came to see that I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself to choose an appropriate partner. I didn't trust myself to be able to have my own back in a relationship. I didn't trust myself to not play out unhealthy behaviors in a relationship. So in seeing all of that, I then really let my guards down and shared with Rod the places that I was hiding and holding back. I shared with him the parts of me where I hurt and I was afraid to say that I hurt. I shared things with him when I was still in the middle of processing them, because part of my prior pattern was that I would share things with Rod once I'd resolved it for myself. And then once I had resolution, I could go to him and say, look what I just worked through. It's all sorted now. And kind of looking for some validation from him, but not letting him be included in my process. One of the impacts of not trusting him in that way is that he felt that his input, he felt that his feelings, thoughts, wisdom wasn't valued or needed in my life. So it created this sense of him having it, from his masculine perspective, having these problem-solving skills and wanting to be able to support the woman in his life, and me just being like, oh, I'll just go over here and do it. So that caused pain for him. It also meant that he felt that he wasn't valued, he wasn't respected, he didn't feel valued, and he didn't feel trusted. Equally for me, when there was that sense of Rod not trusting me, there was a sense of any energy that I extended in his direction being pushed back my way. So there was that sense of like connecting with him on certain things and then feeling him push back, connecting, feeling him push back. So with all that pushback I was feeling, there was a sense for me equally that I wasn't being valued or respected or trusted in the relationship. So it had very strong emotional flavors for both of us, and definitely in both instances we each had things back in our childhood that we went and had a look at, and we both unpacked a little bit together and a little bit separately. But in the unpacking, we were both able to see how there was this lifelong pattern of distrust that had been set up from when each of us were very young. And so being able to include Rod more fully in my life, to share more deeply with him, to be able to include him more in how I was feeling, it meant that a number of things happened for me. Not only did I feel emotionally more connected and more safe with him, but also my body then could relax and open more fully. There's a sense of being able to breathe his masculine energy more fully into my body. There's a sense of feeling a deeper quality of sexual union and sexual meeting with each other, because as soon as my mind relaxed, as soon as my emotional state relaxed and opened, then my body could go, okay, it's okay for me to open even more deeply. And what I keep seeing in my own journey is that this is not really an end point to arrive at. There's often this continual journey of opening and opening. So right when I feel like I love Rod, I trust him as much as I can, there will be something else that comes up into my awareness, and I'll go, oh, there's part of me holding myself back. How do I work on that? And open up to the next part. So trusting somebody, just like loving somebody, is not a destination or an end point. As most of us experience as humans, whether you're in your 20s or your 30s or 40s, most of us came to the place that we're at in our lives today because of 20 or 30 or 40 or more years of conditioning. And the conditioning, it causes us to close down. We'll close down physically, we'll contract our body, we close down energetically, we shut down emotionally, we protect our hearts. And all of that conditioning and closing down is what keeps us separate, is what keeps a sense of isolation in our relationships. And is often, people will often feel into how there's something missing. They want to be able to go deeper, but they don't know how to go deeper. But it's actually unpacking that conditioning, unpacking all the reasons that we learn not to love freely or not to trust openly. And in unpacking those things, then there's more space. There's more space for me to be who I am. And then I allow more space in my life and my relationship for my partner to be present, to contribute, to show up in my life. And then, of course, the relationship goes much deeper as well. I also wanted to speak a little bit about the value of trust for masculine-oriented people, particularly masculine men. So being in a relationship with a man who is a very masculine man and stepping more and more fully into my own feminine energy as a woman, it's important to understand the differences between the way that men and women love. There are aspects that we recognize of how the feminine is most beautifully expressed through a woman in her feminine energy, and aspects of how the masculine is expressed through a man. Now, I have masculine energy, and all the men I know have feminine energy. So men and women have both masculine and feminine energies. But right now I wanted to speak about when we're in that polarity of relating around a woman being rested into her feminine and a man being rested in his masculine. Because my experience in my life and in working with people is that that's when the juiciest, sparkiest, most alive places happen in man-woman couples, when there is that sense of polarity, a woman in her feminine, a man in his masculine. Now, a feminine woman, when she hears a man say, "I love you," there's a part of her that goes, ah. When we hear "I love you," it's something that a feminine woman will crave. Like a feminine woman wants to feel loved, because it's in feeling loved that our hearts expand, our bodies feel full, our energy can move freely, and that love that we are can flow through the heart and the breast. Now, for a man, the thing that a masculine man, will crave most deeply is to be trusted. And this is where I feel a lot of men are missing out today, because there's been quite a strong culture around not trusting men. There's been, of course, there are ways that abusive behavior has happened between both genders, and that's another really big topic that I'm not here to get into today. But there's a lot of talk about what men have done to women and the reasons why women don't trust men, but there's very little acknowledgement of how it leaves men starving and hungry when they're not trusted. And when men are not trusted, it means that women are walking around in the world, like I described myself earlier, looking for reasons to not trust a man, looking for reasons to not let him in. And the fastest way to minimize and diminish somebody is not to trust them. Now, I'll use an example of communicating with a child. If I was communicating with a child and I wanted that child to have a sense of ownership, to feel that they could take some responsibility, and I kept checking over that child's shoulder every few minutes, I kept checking in to say, "Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're doing?" If I kept checking in on the child, if I was undermining the child's actions, if I was redoing their actions after them, if I was patronizing with my directions to the child, does the child have the opportunity to grow? No. It's diminishing. We all know that feeling, and I'm sure I've certainly had it in the workplace. I'm sure you've all experienced it either in family situation or work situation at some point, of feeling that somebody's checking in on you, somebody's right there looking over your shoulder. And when that happens, there's a sense of shrinking. There's a sense of diminishing. However, when somebody says, here's a task, this is what needs to happen, and this can be done with a child when we want to encourage a child to mature, to grow, to take ownership and responsibility, we can give them some instructions, give them some support, let them know I'm here if you need anything, and then that child gets to grow and feel valued, feel worthy. So if we apply this to our relationships with men, what happens is that when we don't trust men, we're energetically looking over their shoulder the whole time. We're double checking what they're doing. We want to know their every move. There's that sense of like, oh yeah, text me when you get there. Text me when you get there. When am I going to see you next? Are you going to make that decision about your career? Are you going to make that decision about study? If we're always checking in, if we're kind of in that mothering energy, which is quite easy for women to go into a mothering energy, but when we do it in our partnerships, we actually start to diminish the man. If we're unnecessarily mothering and following him up on everything, there's no space for him to feel his own authority. There's no space for him to feel that who he is valued and trusted and respected in the world. So if you want to be able to trust the man in your life, have a look at why he's trustable. Have a look at why you chose him. I know for me, some of the things that make a man particularly trustable are consistency, reliability, integrity, clarity, direction. And that doesn't mean a man has to be a robot and not have any feelings and just be like, this is what I'm doing and I'm not veering off my path. There's still space for a man to have his feminine, to express his feelings. Like that's also what makes a man trustable and causes connection and love and to be present. But I know that specifically for me, it's like trust is found in things like consistency and reliability and integrity. And a man who can communicate well also inspires my trust. And so being able to, instead of looking for reasons not to trust, whether you're single, whether you're dating, whether you're in a relationship, have a look and see what is it that has a man feel trustable to you. A lot of my clients who are single women have been doing this practice recently, where they walk through their life, whether it's at work, social, family, but noticing trustable qualities in men. And it doesn't have to be eligible men, but it can be men that they work with or partners of their friends or family members, but noticing what is it that inspires trust from a man, in them towards a man. And when women start to notice the qualities that have men feel trustable, then women start noticing more and more of those trustable qualities in men. It's kind of like when you buy a red car and then you drive down the street and feel like every second car is a red car. So it's the same kind of principle. When you start noticing trustable qualities, you will start seeing trustable qualities everywhere. And then in noticing trustable qualities, there's this sense of, my body relaxes, my body opens. These are the ways that I respond when I'm around a man who feels trustable. Now, just to flip the dynamic a little bit and share a little bit about, from a man's perspective, what I've noticed in working with men over the years, the ways that women hurt men the most are through manipulating men emotionally. So quite often men have learnt from a young age to guard their hearts and to keep their feelings separate from the women in their lives. And the reason I've seen this happen is because men have often experienced, whether it was from their mother or sister or female friends or past relationships, men have often experienced that if they speak about their feelings to a woman, that at some point she will use that soft side against him. She will take what she knows about him and then flip it and make it a bad thing. So quite often when I hear women say, well, I just want him to open up his heart, I just want him to share his feelings, the most powerful way to support a man to open his heart is to be in your heart. Stop trying to get him to open up. Stop trying to get anything from him emotionally, and just be in your own heart. Share your feelings. Be vulnerable. So this is a phrase that Rod, my partner, uses. He speaks about how women can lead with vulnerability. And when a woman leads with vulnerability, when she shares from that place of her feelings, she then inspires a man to feel safe with his feelings. But if she's careless with her own feelings, if she dismisses and shuts her own feelings down, if she tries to use feelings as a bargaining or a manipulation tool, then the man will stay guarded and protected. So men watch for these things. Men watch for the ways in which women are emotionally. And do we know how to hold ourselves emotionally? Do we know how to express our feelings? And do we respect other people's feelings? So a man wants to be able to open in his heart. He wants to be able to receive, but he needs space to be able to open in the heart. In the Neo-Tantra space, we recognize the negative and positive polarities within the body, whereby a woman's vagina is her negative polarity. This is where we receive energy in. Our heart and our breasts are our positive polarity. That's where we send energy out. Men have their heart as their negative polarity. So for a man, he receives energy in at the heart. And the man has his penis as his positive polarity. So that's where he's sending energy out through his penis. So in a man-woman relationship, there's this sense of creating an energetic circuit where the energy comes in through the woman's vagina, out through the heart and the breasts, into the man's heart, out through the man's penis, and you have this circuit. So it's always the negative polarity that is the more sensitive polarity. So in a woman, our vagina is the more sensitive polarity because that's where we receive energy inwards. And women need a certain amount of connection, of flow, of getting to know somebody to feel safe, to be able to open in our vagina. Equally, a man needs a certain amount of feeling safe, of feeling held at his heart before he can open up at the heart space. So whenever we become impatient as women, and I know I've done this, I watch women friends and clients do this, where we go into that energy of, why won't he just open up at his heart? And I just want to know how he's feeling. And then there's this experience of women like really trying to get into a man's heart. And I coined this phrase, which is sticking your fingers in too soon. So if a man walks up to a woman and tries to put his fingers in her vagina too soon, we know what's going to happen. If we're not lubricated, if we don't feel connected, if we don't feel open, and the man comes up and goes, hey, how about some sex? And puts his fingers in your vagina, you'll be like, and taking a big jump back. Equally, when a woman goes up to a man and is like, tell me how you feel. Let me get into your heart. Why don't you love me yet? When we do that, it's the equivalent experience of sticking your fingers in too soon. I know it might sound a little crude, but it's important to honor and respect the sensitivity of each of our negative polarities. Men often appear very tough at their hearts, but the most masculine men I know are actually really, really sensitive at their hearts. They're kind of like big marshmallows where their heart is, the reason they've protected around their heart is because there is so much softness and sensitivity there. And just like the most wild amongst us women, like we want to be able to be full and be orgasmic and be sexually expressive, but if we're penetrated at the vagina too soon, it will be too much and we can't embrace our wild, ecstatic, orgasmic selves. So trust is a lot about allowing space to fully be yourself, allowing space for the other person to fully be him or herself, and then to express what you feel, to allow vulnerability, to allow connection to grow, to develop. And I find that in the space of agendas and unspoken expectations, there's often a stifling of each other's personalities, but also a stifling of the natural flow of connection. So wherever possible, give up the agendas, give up the unspoken expectations, and allow space to really get to know who the other person is, what makes them tick, without forcing or pushing your ideas on them. Because to trust, like I know for me, trusting myself has absolutely changed my life. And then being able to extend that trust in a relationship has dramatically transformed the quality of the relationship. So I feel like I've shared quite a lot with you this evening, and I hope that it helps. Oh, I'm seeing now that there's other comments. I probably should have scrolled a little sooner. Let me just have a look. Freya says, I love how honestly you're sharing. Thank you. The same as men being in controlling father. Yes, that's true. When men go into the controlling father mode, there is a sense of, separation, and a woman feeling that there isn't space to be her full radiant self. Christina has said, amazing. Jackie says she's loving this. Freya says, love this. Awesome. Oh, I'm a little sad that I didn't see your comments earlier. But yes, thank you, Freya, for organising this. It's been a pleasure to present to the Fierce Mystics group. And for anybody who's watching afterwards, if you have any questions, feel free to pop your questions on the thread. I'm happy to come back and respond to any questions on a future date. So thank you again very much. I've enjoyed sharing with you all. And thanks again, Freya. And good night from Hades, the sleeping cat.